Good morning, Horizon Church. Okay, looks like everything's working. I really feel badly for Steve Hinkle because up until like a minute ago, I kept getting something went wrong messages, and it did not look like I was going to be able to get on here. But anyway, either Steven worked his magic at home. Um, anyway, yeah, so I spent the last 15 minutes trying to get this working, and that's about what I was doing. Anyway, I want to, it is St. Patrick's Day, and you got to excuse me because of the struggles I was having. My notes and ideas are kind of floating all over the place in like four places. And so, welcome to Monday. Welcome to St. Patty's Day. Good morning, Estella. I think today is the day where everybody's Irish, right? Isn't that the case today on March 17th, St. Patrick's Day? So, welcome to week 2 of our Lenten kind of devotionals that we're doing any morning. Good morning, Bob. Good morning, Angelica. And Madison, good to have you all here this morning. This is week 2, and what we're going to be doing all week long this week is talking about kind of a follow-up to Sunday's message, the idea of loving God more. But it is St. Patrick's Day, and I really would like to just take a short time on this Monday morning to talk a little bit about St. Patrick. St. Patrick was a real person. Patrick lived. We only know him by the name Patrick. Patrick lived probably in about the 400s A.D. Patrick wasn't Irish, and that's the odd thing. Patrick was British. He was probably like a Roman citizen living in Britain in the 400s. His dad apparently he wrote a book. The reason we know about Patrick primarily, other than a lot of tradition, is Patrick wrote. He wrote something called his Confessions. He also wrote a letter to a soldier. So we have those two writings that traditionally purportedly come from him. And in his confession, he talked about the fact that his father was like a senator or something, but apparently wasn't during his life. He was not an active senator for Rome, but he lived in Britain. Apparently, must have had a relatively prosperous life. It comes from a wealthy family, and Lectio. Okay, I didn't get to do Lectio yet, Estella, because actually, you know what? I got it on my phone. I'll have to look. So Lectio did a tribute to Patrick this morning too. So let me open that up. But anyway, Patrick wrote this confession, which is where we get his information. So when Patrick was about 16 years old, living in Britain, he was a Roman citizen in Britain. He was captured by Irish pirates, or Irish raiding party. And there's a guy I listened to, a historian that I listened to, who always talks about the fact that every good story involves pirates. So this one does. Patrick was captured by Irish pirates. He was taken back to Ireland, where as a young boy, a young teenager, he was put in charge of sheep, apparently, became a shepherd, which gave him a lot of time to be alone. And in his confessions, Patrick talks about the fact that prior to being taken as a captive, being taken as a slave back to Ireland, he was not a man of particular faith. It was when he was a shepherd that he actually, his faith was awakened in him. He spent a lot of time alone and a lot of time reflecting. And he, in our words, kind of came to faith when he was working as a shepherd boy out there alone. And there's a prayer that is famous that he, well, there is a famous prayer, but there are so many different versions of that. When I was looking for them this morning, sitting at home looking on my phone, there's so many different versions. And I was going to look one up when I got here, but I spent too much time trying to get this working because for whatever reason it wasn't working this morning. But he wrote about in his confession. There's a very, very famous section about his awakening to faith as a shepherd. And this is okay. It's in Lectio too, Estella. So thank you. But yeah, this is very famous. And this is what, let me find it. I have another page open where I wrote about this, or where I read about this. So this is what he said. This is what he said. This is a very famous section. He wrote of his time in Ireland as a slave. He said, "I would pray all the time, right through the day. More and more the love of God and fear of him grew strong within me. And as my faith grew, so the spirit became more and more active, so that in a single day, I would say as many as 100 prayers, and at night only, good morning, Tiffany, only slightly less. Although I might be staying in a forest or out in a mountainside, it would be the same. Even before dawn broke, I would be aroused to pray. In snow, in frost, in rain, I would hardly notice any discomfort, and I was never slack, but always full of energy. It is clear to me now that this was due to the fervor of the Spirit of God within me." So that's a really famous section of his confession, where he talked about his, in essence, his awakening to faith as a slave in Ireland. So after a few years, I think like 6 to 7 years, after 6 to 7 years as a slave in Ireland, as a shepherd boy, taking care of sheep, he apparently had a kind of a vision in which he saw a ship and he was going to be rescued from Ireland, and that happened. There was a ship. He talked his way on board on that ship, was taken back to England, and went back home. And when he was back home, he again had a kind of a vision, and he, in this vision, in an Irish voice. There's several accounts of this, but all of what's common to all of them is that in an Irish voice he heard somebody saying, "Come back and walk among us," and he interpreted that as a vision from God to return to Ireland. So he did. He returned to Ireland as a missionary. It was not an easy life when he went back to Ireland. A lot of opposition to him. In his confession, he talks about the fact that there was a period of time when he was enslaved. Again, don't know a lot of details on that. Some of what he wrote in his confession is there's just not a lot of information. But we do know that when he went back to Ireland as a missionary, he spent the rest of his life there apparently, and he traveled throughout the country of Ireland, converting people, baptizing people. Even though there's a lot of opposition. One of the things that he also did was he was really opposed to those Irish slave raiding parties, and he stood up to the slave raiders, to the soldiers who were taking slaves. Particularly concerning to him was the fact that in a lot of cases the Irish pirates, slavers, whatever you want to call them, they would kill the men and they would take the women as slaves. And he stood in great opposition to that. Part of his letter, I can't even remember the name. And again, I was going to write it down, but spend too much time just trying to get this thing working. In this letter to Coronicus, I think it is, something like that, he was excommunicating this soldier, as I understand it, partly because of what he was doing to his captive slaves. So very vocal about these kind of justice issues, and he stood up to slavery. A lot of legends about Patrick over the years. One of the most famous, in fact, this is why shamrocks or clovers are often linked to Patrick. If you look at Patrick was never officially canonized as a saint in the Catholic Church because he was alive at a time that was prior to all those rules about sainthood and canonization, etc. But if you look at images of Saint Patrick today, like stained glass images, all of the saints and all of these guys, they all have symbols associated with them, and usually for Patrick, the symbol is a shamrock, a three-leaf clover. And the tradition is that Patrick in Ireland used the clover as a means of teaching the Irish about the Trinity, the three persons of the Godhead, the way we talk about it, Father, Son, and Spirit. So the shamrock is associated with him. A lot of other stuff, a lot of other traditional stuff associated with Patrick. Included, there's even a fun story about whiskey. Irish whiskey. And this story has something to do with a woman in an inn and some kind of possession, and they ended up drinking whiskey, and all was well. So there you go. You can have your Irish whiskey today. But yeah, so Patrick's a real person. He is a hero in the church, a missionary to Ireland, and I guess some of my only thoughts would be that as we talk about loving God more, and what we talked about on Sunday. If you were here, if you were plugged in at all on Sunday, and you saw that little circle diagram, the fact that we put God in the center and let God direct how we love all these things. Most of the things that I had around that circle were all positive things. But one of the things we have to come to grips with is around the circle of our life, there are often very negative things. We walk through difficult circumstances. I know that I know that Estella is going through a difficult thing right now with the passing of her mom, and all of us walk through difficult things. Patrick did. Okay, great. There he is. There's the letter. Thank you, Estella. There's the correct spelling of the letter that he wrote. But yeah, so we also walk through difficult experiences. And for Patrick, slavery was a particularly difficult experience, taken from his family, taken from his homeland, worked as a slave for 6 years. And yet it's while he was in slavery that Patrick was awakened to faith. And it's often true that it's the difficult circumstances in our life in which we end up more closely connected to God and kind of dealing with God. And we're often awakened, our faith often grows by leaps and bounds during those difficult times. We don't want the difficult times. We don't look forward to them. But it would also be true as we think about, this week, just to get started this week, and because we're thinking about Patrick on St. Patrick's Day, just give some thought to how do you involve God during the difficult periods of life. Some of those difficult periods of life, when I look at the names of the people who are here, and I know some of what you go through, some of those difficult periods of time, they go on for years and years and years, and they never get easier. We can be in difficult marriages. We can have difficult circumstances in life with chronic illnesses and chronic pain and chronic problems. We can go through difficult periods of life because of struggles that we have with our kids. And even in those difficult those difficult things, if you think about putting those around that wheel of your life, we'll talk about that more. We'll talk about that wheel in more detail if you weren't here yesterday and you're clueless about what I'm talking about. But those difficult things would go around the wheel as well. And God has something to say, and he has a way to deal with all of those. So we bring God into our life, even in those difficult circumstances that we have. And Patrick certainly had them. Even when he went back to Ireland as a missionary, his life was tough. He was living in an island that was not his home, among people that were not his, even though he became the patron saint, you could call it that way, of Ireland, and is revered in Ireland today. His life was difficult, and yet God worked through him in really incredible ways. There's a book I have, how the Irish saved civilization, because of Patrick and the Irish coming to Christianity when there were periods of history, dark ages in some of those periods of time. If it wasn't for the Irish and the fact that they were somewhat isolated on their island, and their preservation of so much literature and history, and even religious things, a lot of that would have been lost to history because of what was going on in Europe, kind of the Dark Ages, the fall of Rome, and all those kind of things. So we owe a lot to Patrick and his influence in Ireland. And God used him during difficult times. So I got to keep moving today. It's a day off, and I have places I got to be, things I got to take care of. But happy St. Patrick's Day. And if you think about Patrick at all today, you have any green beer or whatever it is, keep in mind the fact that it was really horrendous circumstances that awakened Patrick to faith in God. And that's simply true for all of us. So, as much as we don't want to go through them, and I don't, and I know that you don't either, even those difficult circumstances can be given to God. You can do that today. As you walk through difficult circumstances, you can give them to God and ask God to use them to grow you. So let me pray. And good morning, Cindy. Let me pray, and then we will move on. And hopefully, thank you to Stephen Hinkle if he's plugged in for just, I don't know if you did anything magic to make this work, but it was not working until about 30 seconds before I actually hit the go live button. So I don't know what magic you did, Stephen, from home, but thank you. So let me say a prayer and then we'll move on. Father, today's the day when, we remember a person, we remember St. Patrick, but more importantly, we remember how in some of the most difficult circumstances of his life, faith was awakened in him. And you used those horrific periods of struggle to grow in him a very profound and a very deep faith. God, thank you for how you used him to bring a whole people to you, and that his legacy, 1600 or whatever it is years later, is still pervasive and it still matters. God, I pray that for all of us, we have really difficult circumstances that we walk through. Some of them are brief. It's one episode. Some of them are chronic and they go on for a long period of time. I pray that even in those difficult circumstances, we would be aware that you can be at work and you can be awakening faith in us. So help us, God, to even look at those difficult circumstances as opportunities to love you and to thank you for what you're doing in our life. Help us to have a good day, God. Thank you for the fact that we get to go through this day with you. And I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, everybody. Well, thank you very much. And I hope you guys have a great St. Patrick's Day. And I love you all. See you tomorrow.